One of the most interesting aspects of Star Wars Legends for me personally is how the New Republic developed its navy. And I mean, think about it, the Rebel Alliance was always outgunned by the Empire. Their fleet was made up of essentially whatever ships they could find to fight for the good fight. But things quickly changed when the New Republic had to not only govern but also protect its member systems. What did the New Republic do? Well, it developed new ships. First off, incremental additions like the MC-80B, later completely new, specially designed warships like the MC-90, and later an entire new philosophy of designing vessels. Today, we'll be discussing the New Republic's 5th Fleet, arguably one of the most advanced fighting forces ever to see action. But first, today's video is sponsored by my good friends at Vite Ramen. Everyone say thank you, Tim, down in the chat. Listen. Do you want restaurant quality ramen in your home, but with the convenience of instant ramen with real ingredients as the broth base, like chicken in the chicken, real pork in the pork, and real Japanese imported white miso in the miso? Vite Ramen is unlike any other. Designed by a guy who cooked at Michelin star restaurants, while also being incredibly good for you, Vite Ramen is so worth trying out. And hey, I always recommend my flavor, Masamon Curry. We specially made it. It's phenomenal. I actually recommend you add peanut butter. But when you order Vite Ramen, you can feel confident knowing you're ordering from a passionate, talented Asian American small business with everything made in the USA, employees paid a living wage, and creators like me given a leash to say whatever we want. Vite Ramen is nutritionally complete, it's high in protein, it's high in fiber. There are tons of options from spicy to vegan to meat lover to low sodium. And if you haven't checked it out after all this time, maybe today's the day, because right now the first 100 people to use the link down in the description can use code ECK20 for 20% off. The next 250, ECK15 for 15% off. And honestly, I'm going to bully Tim so that second link keeps working no matter what, but try the first. Anyway, back to the 5th Fleet. So what was really interesting with the 5th Fleet is that unlike the New Republic's 1st through 4th Fleet, it did not have a designated defense duty. Instead, it was a roving, quick response task force. It was also unique in that it was created entirely out of new class vessels. What does that mean? Well, I talked about New Republic shipbuilding elements to introduce this video. The New Class project was a direct attempt by the New Republic to create ships which, unlike the ISDs and other ships captured by the Imperial Navy or produced during the Galactic Civil War, would specifically serve their needs. The New Republic didn't need to project power generally in the same way that the Empire did. At least they weren't intimidating systems as frequently anyway. So new class ships were designed, according to Kraken's threat dossier, to be tied more closely to areas of space which they defend, which is somewhat ironic, again, given the purpose of the 5th Fleet, which would be made up entirely of new class vessels. But additionally, again, according to Kraken's threat dossier, new class ships are optimized for long range battle. They carry fewer turbo lasers than Imperial ships, but the turbo lasers they do have end up being more effective. New class ships are typically compact and specialized, and the vessels rely on integrated logistics ships and are also generally less sturdy than prior Rebel Alliance designs like Mon Calamari cruisers. New class ships were also pretty heavily fighter based, so you can imagine how they would operate well in mixed task forces with Mon Calamari cruisers, other beefy ships absorbing firepower, while the more fragile new class vessels dole out long range damage. It's also worth noting, and I cover this more in detail in my Eras of New Republic shipbuilding video, that the New Class project also worked in ships from the prior Defender shipbuilding program, but it's not really important for the purpose of today's video. Just know that some of these ships had an older heritage, I guess. Also worth noting, I'll be including designs from Kraken's threat dossier for this video. This book has some insane looking ships, so just know that some of the designs here have been outright retconned, meaning that if you don't like the look of the ship, don't worry about it. Make your own headcanon. But what ships would have served in the 5th Fleet? Well, let's talk about it. We know specifics. The New Republic 5th Fleet was made up of 106 ships divided into 5 task forces. Given its role as a mobile fighting force, the 5th Fleet could be reinforced by the other 4 defensive-based New Republic fleets, and according to the Essential Guide to Warfare, at its peak actually contained over 500 capital ships. By the way, if you're interested in for example, the size of the New Republic fleet, as well as how the fleet is organized, I recommend not only the trilogy, which I know I've talked about in the past, including my most recent video, but also Kraken's threat dossier. Anyway, Tyrant's test is nice because it says specifically that a typical task force within the 5th Fleet was comprised of 21 vessels, including a Star Destroyer or fleet carrier, 2 heavy cruisers, 2 assault carriers, 4 escort frigates, and 5 gunships, which it correctly states is a fast, flexible, and formidable aggregation of firepower. So what are these ships and what do they offer? Well, let's start on the larger side. When it comes to the 5th Fleet, a Star Destroyer or a carrier flagship would usually be either a Nebula class Star Destroyer, sometimes called a Defender class Star Destroyer, or an Endurance. The Endurance and the Nebula were actually built on the same base, with the Endurance being more geared towards general command and fighter carrying, with the Nebula being more of a offensive weapon. And I've covered the Nebula's stated feats in past videos, but this thing, according to the lore, was absolutely deadly. Smaller than an ISD-2, but with more power and less weak points. Pretty impressive. According to Kraken's threat dossier, at the time of the Black Fleet crisis, there were only 10 Defender-class Star Destroyers, but the new class project was constantly creating more each year. It should be noted that new class ships were often using new class fighters, including the Defender class Starfighter. I know, kind of confusing, lots of Defender names in here, as well as the K-Wing, which was an extremely heavy bomber, sometimes referred to as an assault bomber, not unlike the B-Wing. The Endurance fleet carrier was based off the same skeleton as the Defender or the Nebula, as I discussed, but was arguably the ultimate New Republic ship, based heavily on defense, starfighter carrying, and battle coordination. Pretty much an ideal ship to lead a task force. It best serves the New Republic, and I quote, nestled among nearly a score of screening ships. And that was the nice thing about the 5th Fleet. It wasn't haphazardly thrown together or just in the style of the Empire, an Imperial Star Destroyer out hoping for the best. It was intelligently designed task forces which worked really well, either independently or in joint operations. Anyway, moving down in size, one of the ships which served as the muscle for the 5th Fleet was the Majestic class heavy cruiser. Although only 700 meters long, according to Kraken's threat dossier, this vessel had armor and shields equal to the previous generation of Imperial Star Destroyers. We don't know much more than that, but I see the Majestic more as a ship meant to brawl with enemy capital ships, as the larger, fragile, more advanced vessels sit back and fire their long-range turbo lasers. But I will say the Majestic design in Kraken's threat dossier is actually one that I quite like. The Majestic was multi-role, however, according to the book. It had both heavy turbo lasers and anti-fighter weapons alongside missile launchers, ion cannons, and tractor beams. I see the Majestic somewhat like an upgraded, more technologically advanced Victory Star Destroyer. In terms of assault carrier, we're talking largely about another Defender ship, the Defender class. These were both carriers and screening vessels, often loaded with one specific type of starfighter, often E-Wings. Additionally, Defender class carriers would sometimes carry Defender fighters, but this was essentially a versatile support ship. Continuing down in size, we have both frigate and gunships, and I think this is the area where the new class project really succeeds. The Warrior gunship was incredibly successful, for example. It was 190 meters long, dedicated almost entirely to anti-starfighter combat, loaded with light turbo lasers and laser cannons, while larger vessels like the Sashin essentially stood in for, say, the Nebulon B, a mix of light weapons but still those heavy turbo lasers to help engage, especially in a group, large enemy capital ships. And you can probably start to see how the 5th Fleet worked. Additionally, we know that the 5th Fleet took with it fleet tenders to support its extended engagements outside of one single area for resupply, plus specialized vessels like interdictors. Although the 5th Fleet started off entirely with new class projects, as the numbers swelled, ships like Star Destroyers entered the fold, which I think makes sense. The 5th Fleet is intelligently designed and is based around one specific philosophy, but there are definitely weaknesses, including in its ability to brawl up close with powerful enemy capital ships. But that's all I've got for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, kind of off the cuff, but I thought it'd be fun for you guys to check out. Again, I recommend you read the Black Fleet Crisis and Kraken's threat dossier. This is the kind of stuff you enjoy. But see you next time. May the Force be with you.
Let's Rex, we are the Rex. Celebrate another one a birthday bash.
Michael,
It's your birthday today. Take it ice cream, the yard is wet. And
Michael,
take a good boy this year. Open up your